Perfect. Right. Welcome everyone to the Licensing Committee on Wednesday the 22nd of January. I am Councillor Emily Stradwick, the Chair of the Licensing Committee. Housekeeping safety information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. This meeting is being live streamed, including those making deputations. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when you have finished speaking, otherwise the camera will remain on you. Members of the press and public are permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Let's go for introductions. I will start with the councillors first.
Councillor Mary Vallely for Cusham and Wimmering, standing in for Tom Cole.
Councillor Hugh Mason, St Jude Ward.
Councillor Raymond Dean, Copner Ward.
Councillor Ian Holder, St Thomas Ward.
Dave Ashmore, one of the Fratton councillors.
Councillor Stuart Brown, also Fratton.
Richard Adair, Councillor for Nelson Ward.
Councillor Hunt.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Councillor Lee Hunt, and I represent Nelson Ward, which covers Stamford, Tipton, the North End and Buckland. Thank you very much.
Councillor George Madge for the Paulsgrove Ward.
Councillor Russell Simpson, Hillsey Ward, standing in for Councillor Dyke.
And then I will go to Yinka, if you'd like to introduce.
Good morning, everyone. So sorry I came late a little bit. My name is Yinka Denero, Councillor for Charles Dickens Ward. Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. Apologies all. Raj Ghosh, Councillor for Charles Dickens Ward.
Thank you. And then we'll go to Chris Dyke.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Sorry, I'm saying Chris Dyke.
Ben Attrell, Solicitor from Legal Services.
Nikki Humphreys, Licensing Manager.
Good morning, PC Peter Vincent from Hampshire Police Licensing.
Good morning, Colin Pollard from Hampshire Police Licensing.
Perfect. And then we received apologies for Councillor Benedict Swan, obviously Councillor Tom Coles, but Mary standing in, and Chris Dyke, but Councillor Russell Simpson is standing in. Declarations of interest.
I guess I would have a declaration of interest in the sense that I am a personal licence holder in the city.
Amazing. And then just need to approve the minutes from the last licensing committee. Are we all agreed? Perfect. Amazing. And we'll move on to the first agenda, the Licensing Act 2003. Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep the summary to brief because I'm sure your time is better utilised in asking questions or clarification than rereading the report to you. But to set the background, members, this report is in relation to considering the draft statement of licensing policy that the local authority has to produce in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003. And the purpose of today's meeting is to seek your approval to go out to consultation as is required by the Act in relation to the policy before you this morning. In addition to that, I've highlighted separately the cumulative area impact assessment, which looks at alcohol-related crime and disorder in the city, as you are required to look at as your overall statement of licensing policy. And the police have very kindly turned up today to answer any specific questions about the evidence because they are the ones that have provided the data in order for you to consider that assessment. So therefore, we're looking at the statutory obligations under Section 5 of the Licensing Act, that the local authority has to prepare and publish a statement of licensing policy every 5 years. And that policy must be in order for you to carry out your statutory function. Before we can do that, and that policy has to be approved by full council, so it can't be delegated to this committee to do, but obviously this committee will inform council in due course when the policy is adopted. So the Act sets out a number of persons, bodies that the licensing authority has to consult with as part of this process, and any other person it feels relevant to provide a response to that consultation. Appendix A is your draft policy, and I can obviously answer any questions on that, if you've got them. But in summary, compared to the previous licensing policy, the emphasis is in accordance with the statutory guidance. So the statutory guidance issued under the Licensing Act provides information to a licensing authority as to what the policy should contain. So this draft is been prepared in accordance with that guidance, and the differences in summary between the existing policy and the proposed policy is that certain areas have been deleted because they don't actually relate to statutory considerations. I'll give you an example. There was a big section in the current policy which talked about submitting applications. Now, that isn't necessarily a matter that should sit within the policy document. That is advisory, but it was felt that that wasn't necessary for that to be retained within that document because there's other sources of providing that information to applicants and licence holders. The only other real changes were to strip out references to previous guidance which is no longer in force. So that's been taken out as the statutory guidance has been updated, so does your policy. And really, it's a document that sits at the moment as it meets with what the statutory guidance says we should cover in a policy. The only additional part to that, as I mentioned before, is the cumulative impact assessment. Page 2 of your report, starting from paragraph 3.5, sets out the statutory obligations because it is now a statutory, or it's measured in a statutory way where it wasn't done previously when the Licensing Act was first introduced. The Act sets out expressly what a licensing authority has to do in terms of evidence that it has to produce in order to justify the imposition of a cumulative assessment. That data has been provided to you, the statement has been provided to you, and I'm sure the police are going to be able to address those issues with you. But it is data-led that the evidence I can provide to you is to say that's why we are recommending that we go out to consultation and retain that cumulative impact area that we have specifically for Guildhall Walk. No other areas of Portsmouth, just Guildhall Walk. I think really, members, the report just basically sets out the factual elements of how we have to go to consultation and the ways that we intend to do that. So it's just for information, really. And there's a number of other appendices that have been made available to help you today in terms of there is a handbook available from the Local Government Association for members sitting on licensing committees. There has been a cumulative integrated impact assessment, and you have referenced in there any legal and finance comments in relation to this policy proposal. So really what I'm seeking today, members, from you is that your approval to go out to public and statutory consultation on this draft policy.
Thank you, Nikki. Members, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm by no means any licensing guru, but I've got some very basic questions, just really for transparency for any residents watching. When was the last time this was revised?
Unfortunately, the policy was not. The policy should have been revised and reviewed in 2022 because other pressing issues on the licensing authority with other statutory changes and such implications. We have had an overdue period of 2 years. So it is we are out of time.
Can I just intervene a moment? I'm terribly sorry, but I'm in difficulty with hearing things. No, it's all right. But could you just... It's not working again. I wonder if, Anna, you could make representations this time, get me something that actually enables me to hear. It's not a good look when somebody who's partially deaf just can't hear the debate. But if you all just, if you would mind this morning, just actually speaking closely like me, and then I get the opportunity to hear. It's one of the problems we have is people don't speak close to the mic. It's all right for everyone else who can hear, but I'm afraid I just can't. Sorry, everybody.
I'll ask my question again. Did you hear my question, Lee? Okay, I'll say again, I don't lack projection. That's probably one of my strongest points. So the question was, transparency for residents. When was the last time this Licensing Act was revised?
The policy was last revised in 2022. So we are, by a couple of years, we are out of date under the guidance that we're given of how long that policy should be reviewed by.
I had a follow-up question. Has it ever been tried to be revised so we weren't running late beforehand, or was it just a case that it was another COVID situation and it's run over?
It is. It was a case of COVID coming across and affecting the work. Obviously, this licensing committee is very busy, and we had other statutory functions to perform in terms of duties under taxi and private hire for safeguarding, and those came in under statutory guidance, and unfortunately those pieces of work had to come first, according to members' wishes. So we are now at a point where we have dealt with safeguarding, and we've made sure that your policies in relation to those matters have been appropriately put into place, and now we need to comply with our statutory requirements under this legislation.
Yeah, just to follow up the last, so we are quite late with this. The only reason I emphasise on this is mainly because I looked at the previous years and I couldn't find it. So I know that we are running late with this, and I know from previous licensing committees when there has been urgency. I remember a particular one about 2 years ago with taxis that it was like, well, we must get this done, we must get it done, but there hasn't been as much urgency with this. So I'm kind of glad it's come today so it can actually be resolved, I hope.
Members, I do apologise, and I think in the report, I do offer that apology to you in relation to the delay that this getting this policy to you has caused. So I do apologise again publicly that, yeah, it should have been done earlier.
Yeah, I think Nikki might be glad when I stop nagging. Councillor Adeniran.
It's just a follow-up on that question, really. So before 2022, how often do you review it, the policy?
The policy was, the legislation has changed. So originally, when the Licensing Act was first introduced and implemented, the requirement was on licensing authorities to review it every 3 years. The government then changed that position through the statutory guidance and requires the licensing authority now to review its licensing policy every 5 years. Separate to that, when we talk about the cumulative impact assessment, and I apologise, it may well be that Ben might want to help you from a legal perspective, but the cumulative impact assessment, that although it sits within the policy, that has a requirement on the licensing authority to review every 3 years.
Thank you. Councillor Hugh Mason.
On page 51, we see the map of the identified CIA area. On page 53, we have the crime data. It would seem to me that the Guildhall Square area, the central area, CIA area, is quite clearly the worst area and most problematical area in the city. But also, if one looks at central Southsea, the Albert Road NTE area, where theft offences are more than twice those in the Guildhall Square area. Why is just the Guildhall Square area, central Portsmouth a CIA area, and what were the criteria for defining that and not for including something like Central Southsea?
With the Chair's permission, it may well be helpful for members if the police are able to add and expand a little bit more information on the data and why the recommendation was limited to Guildhall and not extending it. It was discussed, but I think the police can offer you better information as to why that decision was made.
I look forward to hearing it.
Thank you, it's Colin Pollard.
Colin, just come closer for Lee.
Sorry, of course.
Right.
So when we were assessing the data that our system had brought out on these search requirements, we were looking at total volume of nighttime economy-related crime. Whilst we have included it by crime type, we were looking at the total numbers. The difference between, and I'm certainly not making an argument not to consider a CIA in relation to Central Southsea, but one of the considerations we gave was the geographical area of Central Southsea, for example, running the length of Elm Grove and Albert Road, is much larger than the footprint of Guildhall Walk and contains a greater number of licensed premises. So in terms of cumulative impact, we haven't done any kind of equations for the footfall or for the number of premises. We've looked at, that's a much larger area where things are spread out rather than confined to a much smaller area such as Guildhall Walk, if that makes sense.
Hugh, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, it makes sense. So you did consider then Central Southsea as a possibility. The other question which I have related to this is that the NTE crime data date from 2021, which is now more than 3 years ago. Why were you not looking at more up-to-date data?
We were looking for complete calendar years, and we started the process toward the ends of 24. So that was our 3-year complete calendar year period was from 21.
Councillor Madrick, did you?
I think thought Stuart was next, Chair, but I'm happy to.
Councillor Mason's question was more or less in different words what I was going to ask about as well.
Okay, so my question is just for clarification, Nikki, how long is the consultation period?
The best practice for, in terms of consultation, we should be looking at, for meaningful consultation, members, is a minimum of 6 weeks.
That's fine. And really a question for legal services is, have we had any legal challenges on the fact that our policy has been out of date, or have we managed to slip under the radar quite luckily?
There haven't been any challenges to date.
Perfect. To confirm, could we have had theoretical legal challenges for having an out-of-date policy?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. That's all, Chair.
Councillor Hunt?
Yeah, thanks. I'm really interested in this question, gentlemen, of Albert Road, and I'll explain why when I make some comments. I would like to ask you a direct question. Is there more police and council resourcing going into the CIA area at Guildhall Walk than any other place in the city? And therefore, the chances of recording crime, identifying crime, seen and witnessed by police and so on, is greater than elsewhere where the resources are much less.
I can only comment on our nighttime economy resourcing, and yes, we do put higher resources into the Guildhall Walk area over the other nighttime economy zones that are listed in the report. It is possible, yes, that they are identifying more crime because they are present, but I haven't dug into the data to see what's police reported and what is public reported. So I can't be any clearer than that. But yes, there are more resources deployed into Guildhall over a weekend, for example.
Councillor Vallely?
Am I right in thinking there's no crime above North End? Are we all good citizens up there?
We've got good councillors there. It's same with Paul's Grove, you see. We get on with it.
Nikki, would you like to answer why the North... Well...
No, you wouldn't be right in saying there's no crime in those areas, unfortunately. What I can say is, as we were putting the report together, we were focusing on areas which we've already defined as high concentrated areas for nighttime economy usage. So those areas are Gunwharf Quays, but much less so these days. We've had a lot of closures down there over the years, so numbers and footfall have dropped, as has crime and disorder linked to nighttime economy. We've got the Guildhall Walk area, which isn't just the square, that spreads out. We've got some venues on the periphery there. And then we've got the Palmerston Road, Osborne Road area where we start to get that high concentration. And then we've got that Albert Road area as well. With regards to North End, whilst we do have some concentration of licensed premises, we don't see the same nighttime economy activity there, if that makes sense.
Nikki, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I was just, obviously, if Colin was finished, it's just a more generic comment for members' information that although we're seeking to go out on consultation for a cumulative an area assessment, that doesn't negate if we dealing with cumulative impact on individual premises. So if there were concerns about an area or a particular application that responsible authorities considered could have a cumulative impact, then the lack of one being in that particular area as an assessment doesn't negate the argument that can be put forward to say that there is a cumulative impact problem. And equally, if circumstances were to change drastically, there would be nothing to prevent the licensing authority looking at additional assessments and additional areas outside of that 3 year. We're not tied to, we can't review it in the meantime. You have that discretion at any time if you feel that there is a problem related to licensed premises and disorder.
Councillor Hunt?
Yeah, I have two more questions. One is about common sense. So if councillors here today believe there is another area that ought to be a CIA, are they entitled to use their common sense and their local knowledge rather than be driven by the evidence provided by the police? Are they entitled to do that or not? And secondly, if it goes, I'll let you guys, don't worry, you carry on, it's important. All right. The second question is that if the councillors here were minded to go out to consultation today with this document, and it subsequently came back that there was evidence that another area had to go and become a CIA, would that be enabled, or would it have to be reconsulted upon?
I'll deal with the first part and I'll let Nikki deal with the second. In terms of using your a common sense and your local knowledge in terms of formulating policy, generally speaking, that's acceptable. However, in terms of cumulative impact policies in particular, that is very clearly prohibited by the guidance and case law. It does need to be very much an evidence-led process, and the primary and, let's face it, the only source of real evidence on crime is going to be coming from the police. So you need to be led directly by police evidence in terms of formulating the cumulative impact policy. Hope that helps.
The second part of the question was if we went out to consultation, presumably we will go out to consultation, but when it comes back, if evidence has been accumulated that another area needs to be looked at in this way, could we see representations from the police, again, that would direct us in that, toward that?
I think in relation to this particular consultation, members, that analysis and that research has been done for you in preparation for this meeting. If I would have thought, well, I would have been very surprised if the police didn't bring you all the up-to-date information today and that they were going to give you more information in 6 weeks' time. We're here to give you the data as it stands going forward.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Probably one for our colleagues from the police. Obviously, with the...
Come closer, yeah.
Sorry. Probably one for our colleagues from the police then. I just want some clarity, if you can. Obviously, the output area is labelled Gun Wharf, Guildhall Square, Central Southsea. Fairly self-explanatory as to exactly where they cover. North End could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Could you give us some explanation of which actual areas of the city are covered by the North End output area?
Yeah, thank you. So North End would cover the outside of the Guildhall Square area and up to Hillsey. And then we did have a separate area for Portsmouth North. But actually the figures in terms of numbers of incidents were dramatically low in compared to the others. That those figures weren't included because purely the nighttime economy within sort of Cosham has really dropped down over the last few years. So we used to have 6 key nighttime economy zones, we're down to 5. I think just a point really that I'd like to add is that even though the areas mentioned may not be within the cumulative impact area, every single licence application is assessed and risk assessed by us as the police. So it doesn't mean that we don't care that it's in another area, that licence would go through the same process. We would look at what conditions would be relevant for that premises. And certainly for late night time economy premises, we would be looking, for example, at things like a CCTV condition, door staff, and all of our usual conditions around staff training, things like that. So please don't think that we just pick on Guildhall and just concentrate there. It is every area would have the same amount of attention. It's just the cumulative impact area in terms of the crime data.
So my understanding then is that the North End one is basically everything north of the railway line?
Yes.
Yeah. And obviously in some areas of that you've got no licensed premises whatsoever. Others you've got quite a lot of wet trade nighttime economy, but you also have a lot of takeaways, particularly up the Fratton Road, Kingston Road, London Road area. So I'm hoping that the data includes any crimes relating to potentially theft from kebab shops or intimidation of staff in those, and not just ones specifically at pubs, bars and clubs.
No, so the way that the data works is there's a nighttime economy qualifier in our stats classification, and this will be any incident in those areas that happens between 1900 and 0700 hours. We would then go in as licensing officers, hopefully some of you see the daily checks we send out, we would go through those checks and we will quantify that it's actually happened within the licensed premises or as a result of a licensed premises, because what lots of officers will do is landmark a pub, and then it might well seem that, you know, one pub is horrendous, but it might actually only be the key landmark in that area. So we would go back in and quantify that data as well on a daily and weekly basis.
Yeah, go.
Thank you. I think we could make a case for making a CIA in Albert Road. In Albert Road. I mean, just talking, as I say, I live in the area. I go to Albert Road quite a bit, and Councillor Hunt and I have seen quite a few incidents in Albert Road which have gone unreported. I mean, a little while ago we were driving down the road and we saw 2 people having a fight outside the Quickie Mart. One was on the floor being pummeled. We went across, stopped it, sent one party away, sent the other party away in the other direction. We also spent an evening in the CCTV where we saw lots of incidents taking place outside the Quickie Mart. A few months ago, we saw what I can only describe as a running battle up and down Albert Road, where somebody was being chased and another 3 or 4 people were chasing another one in another direction. I think the problem is, if these incidents aren't reported, we might get a false impression of the area. As you say, it's only through incidents being reported that they actually come to the notice of the police, and then they get the attention they require. So I really think we could make a case for the CIA being extended to Albert Road.
Thank you. Right, members, any more questions? Okay, we'll move on to comments then. Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, okay, so as ever, when we're making decisions, stats and geographical areas and so on can skew things. So let's deal with the North End question first of all. There aren't the licensed premises in North End going up through to Cosham that there are in other places. The nighttime venues, which we all recognise, is mainly around Southsea. I won't go on too much about this, but Councillor Dare is right. We saw only just before Christmas This guy was two drunks, two big guys, more than that actually, 3 or 4 of them. And I have seen a lot of punches in my time, including on boxing on TV. But this guy was down on the ground. He got his jaw punched so hard, you actually saw the jaw go sideways. And then the man came back and did it again. And it was not terrifying to us because we know about this, but it was alarming. We went and intervened. And the man didn't stop. He just kept pummeling him and pummeling him. And we got him away from him, and he ran off. He didn't run down the road. He went down the road, got his gander back up, and came back with mates, and we had to come in between them all and stop it all. The point that Councillor Dare is making well, and that I'm going to make again, is you just don't see, or at least not aware of, although I have seen it a bit more lately, police presence or any uniform presence along Albert Road at all. On the other hand, pubs are closing in that location too. And I'm also taking into account that we must be driven, when it comes to the paperwork, by what the police tell us, and we have to go on that. But I have a concern as a community safety rep for the city, you see, because I do believe that some places are being, through no fault of their own, not looked as closely as Guildhall Walk. And when you see the stats are accumulating, all of the time, because the police are there, CCTV look at it, wardens see it, the licensing officers see it, the stats accumulate in this one place and becomes a sort of invirtuous circle. So you get the focus on there, when other places, for whatever reason, not least the fact that we have the mistake of the 24/7 licensing brought in by the last government, and then the last government also slashed police numbers by 20,000 as well. So all of these things have come together to see reduced policing, although I know they say they're trying to get numbers up, but we know police are retiring as fast as they, or leaving as fast as they are recruited, so we have a problem. Thank you for indulging me in this, but it is a real concern that we don't have the evidence, and I believe the evidence would be there if the police presence was there, or maybe it would reduce it in any event. So obviously I'm going to support the officers' reports this morning. I am going to take into account what the police have said, but I hope very much indeed, because I don't think from what the officers said we can make Albert Road, for example, a CIA, because we're prohibited from doing that because the evidence isn't there. But I would like to have at least investigated it further. And I hope that in due course the police will look at what the committee is concerned about, and me as a community safety rep, and I'll take it up with the commander in due course as well, along Albert Road, which is quite frankly sometimes a law unto itself, with the things that we have seen as we go home from looking after our mother at night time. So I think I've covered everything that I wanted to say. Just one moment. Yes, and to thank the police for the work that they do, of course, and it's not an easy job. So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you for coming along today, and I'm sure you'll report back our concerns on behalf of the administration about Albert Road.
May I come in? I would just like to come in on one of the points that you made there. Actually, I think the evidence that we've provided does provide you evidence to make a decision on Albert Road. That decision is clearly yours to make. The police recommendation stuck with Guildhall area on the basis that that was the highest volume of crime stats that we had there, and you make a good point about how those stats might be accumulating there at a higher rate. But the second highest stats are Albert Road, and so I think you could give consideration to the CIA if you were minded.
On that basis, I would like us to create Albert Road with the geographical area determined by the police in consultation with our licensing officers as a cumulative impact area. So that's my amendment to the officer's report, if I am allowed to do that. And the evidence is there, and the police have agreed that the evidence is there. So I see absolutely no reason why we should not do that this morning.
Nikki?
Members, as Colin has said, you have got that data before you as part of the evidential basis for the Guildhall Walk and Environs. If the police are suggesting that further communication before we go out to consultation, we can add to the existing assessment and consult on the basis of an additional area. But obviously, we'd need to work that up before we go out to the consultation, so that is able to be discussed and responded to by those who are involved in that process.
Yeah, I'm sure you can add in 2 lines fairly simply, and the police have told you that it is quite possible. I don't know whether the rest of the committee will agree with me, but I hope very much that be seconded and that we can just move on more quickly than this.
Councillor Madrick, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hunt just said, don't you dare disagree. Fundamentally, I'm terrified of Councillor Hunt. He's got power. Fundamentally, that's a joke, by the way, for anyone watching. I don't want a news article about it. I'm not intimidated by Councillor Hunt. I do agree. When I looked at the report, I did find it reasonably strange that Albert Road wasn't included. I would be slightly concerned about it delaying it going out to consultation. So if the officers are going to be here and tell me, well, it's going to take an extra 4, 5, 6 weeks to go out to consultation, that would make me uncomfortable. Not because I don't want to add it in, but because I don't want to delay on the current one, because the licensing policy is already delayed enough. So I guess, unfortunately, we have to go back to questions because this has been brought up. But I guess my question is, number one, if we include it, which in theory I'm happy to, because I do agree with Councillor Hunt's comments, and if he does live in the area, he's got a much better lived experience than I. How long will that extend? How long will it take you then to go out to consultations? That's my first question. And secondly, if you're going to say to me now it's going to take, say, 2 additional months, which seems a bit crazy, but if that is the case, then is this something we can look at on a separate agenda item? So yeah, if you could just answer those 2 first, and I'll go back to my comments if that's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Definitely, I don't think it would take myself and the police take 4 months to decide the scale and the extent of where that proposed additional cumulative impact area would be. But I have to be reasonable in saying to you that that discussion needs to be had. We do have to create a case. I can't just add, and number 2, we have to look at the circumstances for each individual area to justify the cumulative assessment. So that will take time for us to look at the facts, delve in more deeper, if you like, to Albert Road and add that to it. So I think, being reasonable and obviously looking at the police availability as well, because they're the ones that are going to have to drill down and provide more data, geographic. Would that another month?
I agree with your timescale if that's what the local authority would need. And forgive me, I'm not very experienced with these policies and this particular process. However, the data's already in it. We've provided the crime data. We can see that the second highest, by not actually quite that much of a margin, volume of crime is that Albert Road nighttime economy area. We can provide a map in there and add a police recommendation to also include Albert Road following this. What more would be required?
Yeah, I think it is just that narrative, because we are making, as part of, sorry, Chair, because this is a statutory requirement and the Act sets out the process that we have to evidence, because at the end of the day, we are now creating a consultation that suggests that a large entertainment area is going to be affected by the introduction of a cumulative area assessment. Because effectively that creates a presumption that any premises within that area, I it's creating a rebuttal presumption that they can't apply for new licences or they can't vary existing licences. That's the ultimate effect of that assessment, and that's needs why we need more narrative because it's a new area that you're asking for that is going to affect a lot more licence holders than the current one who live with a cumulative assessment area since 2004. You are likely to see a lot more concerns, or, you know, we're going to have to be satisfying licence holders that policy, that new policy on them that they can't develop unless we feel that it promotes the licensing objectives, that their businesses will be curtailed as a result of that policy. And I think if that's what you want, we have to be very clear within that narrative to withstand any potential challenge. And I don't know whether Ben wants to... I do apologise that he's behind me, so I can't see. So maybe Ben wants to give you some legal advice on that.
There's not really a massive amount that I can add to that, to be honest. I think it's been fairly well thrashed out. The only point that I would have made, which is the latest one that Nikki has made, is the impact of the policy is quite severe. And therefore it does need to be a robust process of policy adoption. It can't simply be done on a whim. But what you're hearing from the police is that the evidence will sustain it if there is an opportunity to put it together. So it may delay the publication of the policy by a matter of a few weeks, but or perhaps a month, I think, is what's being discussed. So that's well within your remit to decide to go down that route if that's something you wish to be explored. And that is the purpose of consultation ultimately, isn't it? That proposals are put out there and publicised so everybody can then in turn consider and comment.
Councillor Madrick.
Thank you for that response. So now I'm going to sit on the fence, which is something I don't usually do, because I'm a bit torn here, because I do agree that Albert Road should be assessed. What I'm slightly now concerned about is the fact that you said obviously it's a new area. The other one's been 2004, so it's kind of in the flesh and blood of the area, so they kind of know what's coming. And if we're adding a new area, it's going to cause additional issues or complaints or consultation. I'm concerned that it will delay this new licensing policy, which we've already been told by the legal advisor that we could legally be challenged on with almost all licensing decisions we make. That's a huge concern to me, and I think that concern certainly outweighs a delay of doing a cumulative impact assessment. So if the committee vote to put the Albert Road on the consultation, I will agree to it. If the committee decides collectively that we will take the report as is and then direct officers to start proper investigation and research into Albert Road effectively, because what we've been told, Chair, is that the police don't have as much resources or time down there, and I think that we need additional information to kind of understand Councillor Hunt and Councillor Dare's concerns, because I think they're genuine, and I think they are right, because my experience on licensing for the last 4 years tells me that Albert Road is a problem. But all I'm hearing is that we need solid evidence and proof to not be challenged through case law. Ben's nodding. We need serious evidence and knowledge to not be challenged through case law in relation to this consultation decision to add an additional area. And I don't want the policy to be delayed, because as a council, we cannot afford for the policy to be delayed. So I think what I would recommend, I've just talked myself into it, I think what I would recommend is taking the policy as is currently, however, making a clear direction to the police and to the licensing authority that the committee are very concerned about Albert Road, and we wish for Albert Road to come back to a future committee within 6 months with full evidence and a full report specifically on Albert Road to then at a later date add Albert Road as a CIA area separately, because then that could be done separately to the policy. It can be consulted on separately. Any issues, complaints, concerns can then be looked at separately, so it doesn't affect this policy being delayed any further, because I don't want legal challenges from licence holders or DPS holders or anybody else like that, because we haven't got an up-to-date policy, and that's what I'm concerned about. And finally, Chair, I do want to make an amendment to the recommendation as well, separately. As anybody knows me that's I've been on scrutiny panels and stuff, I hate work overflowing into following municipal years with different chairs and different body members. I'm concerned that recommendation, I have spoke to Nikki about this already, I am concerned that the recommendation says that this report after consultation should be brought back at the end of May. By the end of May we would have had an AGM, which means there is a chance we'll have a new chair, a new vice chair, and a entire new subcommittee looking at this. I'm glad I'm getting some nods here. And I would like this wrapped up before the end of this municipal year. So doing the calculations, obviously you said it takes 6 weeks. We've got 15 weeks until this report, till the consultation needs to be published. We've got 15 weeks to spare. So if the consultation takes 6 weeks, that means we've got 9 weeks available. Even if Nikki takes 4 weeks for this additional recommendation that Councillor Hunt's put forward, we've still got 5 weeks to buy. So I would like to amend the consideration to say that it must come back to us no later than April 2025, because then that would give us the time to consider the consultation and, sorry, my dad's calling. It would give us additional time to look at the consultation and to agree as a committee, as this committee that sits before us today, whether we want to accept it, and then we can tie it up nicely before the AGM and before we all change positions. And I think that would be a really nice, tidy way of doing it. So, as I say, that's the only recommendation I'd like to amend, Chair, is that we move it to come back to by the end of April rather than by the end of May. Thank you.
Thank you. To you, sorry.
I think the last suggestion from Councillor Madgwick is...
I'm terribly sorry. Could you just talk towards the mic, Hugh? Sorry.
Okay. I think that the last consultation, that last point made by Councillor Madgwick is a very good one. It would be difficult, I think, if this was to be brought back to a new committee. So I think that if it is possible by April 2025, that is what I would support. On the matter of Albert Road, certainly I would like to see a consultation, whether within this period, preferably within this period. I live within earshot of Albert Road. I go into the shops on Albert Road in the mid-evening and late evening, and have certainly myself seen evidence of extensive shoplifting. I have also heard many a fight on Albert Road. So I think it is worth considering that, going out to a consultation on whether this should be a priority area. Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart Brown.
This might be a little bit of a moot point considering how long I've been thinking about this question, but Nikki, I was wondering, just for the sake of clarity and context, if you could give us a little bit more detail about exactly what restrictions a CIA puts on an area. So I'm inferring it's not just restricting new bars, pubs and clubs, but it's any form of premises licence. So that would include restaurants, takeaways. Does it also affect a licensed premises ability to apply for a temporary events notice?
No, it doesn't for temporary event notices. That's an easy one to get rid of because they are, as it says, temporary events, they're short in duration and they're not bound by policy. They have their own regulation and consultation process. In terms of the impact of the assessment, you are creating a presumption. You are saying within your policy that there is an issue with a particular defined area with promotion of the licensing objectives, because it's not just alcohol and crime and disorder. You're looking at public safety, protection of children from harm, all the licensing objectives. And so you are giving a message through this policy that this area will apply to any current licence application and any potential variation and new, that an applicant, it is incumbent on an applicant to prove how the operation of their premises will not contribute to the existing problems that are in their area. So, for example, if you have a restaurant opening or wants to open in the area, they will have to demonstrate to the licensing authority that the measures that they will put in place or the activities they're providing won't add to the existing problems. And that will be down to fact and degree, and when an application is consulted on, as we have to do, that it will be the relevant responsible authorities who will say, no, I think this will have a conflict, or the applicant hasn't put enough information to say how they're going to not give a further detrimental effect. But somebody, if you know, from the anecdotal evidence that members have given today, if you have one of the existing premises who says, I want to stay open for another hour, it does lead to a suggestion that will that contribute to problems, and that may well, through your policy, be challenged.
So, hypothetically then, if there were a pub that were closing down, if there were a pub that were closing down and somebody wanted to amend the premises licence to turn it into a restaurant, it would be under just as much scrutiny as a new drinking establishment opening up if it was within the CIA.
Yeah. The existence of a cumulative impact area does not negate the requirement for the licensing authorities, officers, the police, or any other responsible authority, or indeed residents. It doesn't relieve us of that. We've still got to make representations to the committee. We've still got to demonstrate why and provide information why a licence should not be granted or should be granted subject to conditions. But the policy is saying we've got a problem and we're not going to allow any activities that could add to the existing problem that we've got.
Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, thank you very much. Members, I don't think the CIA would be a dead hand if that's the way that the thinking is going on Albert Road. As soon as the shop closes on Albert Road, and I'm sure Councillor Madrick has got his finger on the pulse, a new one moves in. And it's these sort of new wave bars, these theme bars, and so on, that move in, and they're extremely popular. I know, I've been in a few, and quite late at night too. So, you know, there's no worry about, as far as I'm concerned at least, that the CIA would be a dead hand on this geographical area. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Also, I mean, this is a consultation, is it not? Mrs. Humphrey? The consultation, is it not?
And I think the officers have guided you, both the police and ourselves, to say it is. But what we're saying is the actual...
Yeah, I get that, but it is a consultation, so it seemed to me not correct to say, well, we'll go away and let you think about it and then come back and consult. That seemed to me to be adding to delay. But I would say to members, just to paraphrase very quickly, that the police gave the evidence that the Albert Road area is capable of being a CIA. They provided their evidence. We heard from a local councillor who did it, and indeed in the text committee, which some of us have been in a few times, Councillor Gerard has complained bitterly about what goes on in Albert Road at night time, complains very frequently of broken bottles and glass and so on up the street. So the evidence is there. It can go out to consultation, and then presumably it will come back to be decided upon in the end. Is that correct?
What yes, the consultation, and I have to say, I know I'm sorry, Chair, but I know you're in debate, but I'm trying to act fact, in accordance with the legislation, that we need to have meaningful consultation. In order to have that meaningful consultation, there is more to be done if you need and want Albert Road. That can be. We're at the starting point of consultation, but we need to make sure that there's enough there to justify that as we're asking for responses back. And then there is a quandary for me as an officer to say to you as members of the licensing committee that by setting a very small window, the addition of today of Albert Road will require more work by officers and the police to be able to do that. We're not saying that we won't and can't, if that's your recommendation, but I think we have to realise that the consultation process has to be meaningful, or that could be challenged.
Well, very quickly then, I don't think it, personally, and I hope Councillor Madgett will support us in this, but I don't think that a delay of 3 or 4 weeks is much of a delay that will provoke a legal challenge, quite frankly. I think it's highly unlikely, but he may think otherwise. But I think doing something which protects the lives of people and property and maybe prevents somebody from being killed by one of those awful punches to the head or something like that, and then provokes the OPCC to look at what we've done to send more resources to that area, is something that be welcomed by the whole of the council. I would have hoped, because you are protecting people's lives, the premises all along there, including the licensed premises, and so on. So I hope very much that will happen. I think the evidence has all been given. I'm not asking for anything unreasonably. I think it's a good idea, and I think it's something, for the licensing authority to have meaningful conversation with licensed premises in any area, I would have hoped is a good thing. But that is what I'm asking for. I hope I will be supported. I know that Councillor Hugh Mason seems to be supporting that, and I hope the rest of us will too. And who knows whose life we might save.
Councillor Madrick.
Okay, so following on from that, so he's intimidating me again. Just following on from that, Nikki, if we included the Albert Road into this, are you confident we could still get this back by the end of April with everything ticked off? Just say yes.
You know she's about to go into the renewal of licensing, right?
I'm concerned that because the situation as it stands at the moment is that the policy is, as is drafted for you today, is it complies with the statutory guidance, it identifies an area that has long been established. I suspect that if you want further work to be done on completely new area that will potentially impact on a lot of people, be that licence holders or be that residents, because we need to obviously acknowledge that they may want to contribute to that policy consultation, we might need to review how much time do you give in, again, for meaningful consultation. If I get a significant amount of responses, which that there is potential for that, given Albert Road, the amount of premises on that road and members of the public that may want, officers will need time to consider those responses and prepare them for you. And I'm just concerned that if we're going to provide you with a meaningful consultation, we have to have the sufficient tools and time to do that.
Okay. I'm terribly sorry.
You can go first if you want. I don't mind.
I'm terribly sorry. I don't understand, Ms Humphreys, how the licensees, that I know we've got to consult them, we're going to do that, but I don't see how they can decide whether we, as a local authority, as a local licensing authority, can go out to consult about whether or not that is a CIA. I really don't, do they overrule us or something, or do we have the say or not? Because from what you're saying is that they overrule us. I know you say we've got to do it, but I keep coming back to the police. You say that we have to be driven by the evidence from the police. And that is exactly what we're talking about. We're being driven by the evidence from the police. But you are saying it's not good enough. We've got to go and do something else.
Councillor Hunt, I am really apologies if I've given you that impression. What I am saying is that you may have more of an active consultation, engagement, because you're looking at another area that licence holders may want to make responses and to the consultation because of the effects that it'll have them. I'm not saying that they have a right to be consulted and they have a right to make a response, and they will want their response to be considered by yourselves as the licensing committee, because although it's the council that will adopt this policy, you will obviously as a committee commend that document to them. And I'm just saying that we must be prepared in looking at introducing a new area that could give rise to more responses that you will need to be considering, and officers will need time to prepare that for you. So I apologise if I gave any other impression.
I think the police's evidence is crucial, and that's where I leave it. Thank you.
Councillor Madrick.
Okay, I'm off the fence. So I attempted to absolutely support, because I actually think Councillor Hunt is entirely correct. I think he's absolutely entirely correct. And I wanted Nikki just to say yes, and then that would have made my decision easy, because I would have supported it with a blink of an eye. But I cannot, in good faith, allow this licensing document to be delayed or risk being delayed any longer. We are 2 years out of date. We've already been pulled into the gas committee, which I'm sure the vice chair can confirm, because it's late. It's been labelled as a serious concern of this council. So we've already failed at internal audit twice. It's gone from moderate to high risk. We've had the legal advisor here today inform us that we could be up for legal challenges on any variations, reviews, any committee hearings we've had, and especially now we're in a public forum and people can listen to this, they're now fully aware that we can be challenged on future ones. I cannot in good faith delay this consultation any further or risk delaying it. So for that reason, I can't support Councillor Hunt's proposal. However, I think it's very pertinent to add, and I think what we should add is that in the next licensing meeting, which will be the feedback from this, which will be the end of April, hopefully, that there's another item agenda to add Councillor Hunt's request on so that it can be looked at as a separate item agenda at the earliest available opportunity, because that way we're not delaying the current licensing policy, which cannot be delayed any further. But we're also noting the seriousness of Councillor Hunt's concerns, and hopefully that'll only be 2 months in arrears, if that makes sense. Because then if there is additional consultation, because what I'm hearing from Nikki is that because it's a new area, we are going to get probably a lot of licence holders, takeaways, pubs, bars, etc., consult in. They'll probably pack this room to the rafters, and that is going to cause delays or potential issues on the current licensing thing. So that's my comment, Chair, is that I think that I reluctantly will not support Councillor Hunt's recommendation, although I actually agree with it, which is a weird dynamic. But I do ask, as a real serious note, that the police and Nikki, if obviously Councillor Hunt's recommendation doesn't get passed, I want to force or really stress to the licensing department and to the police that we expect a new CIA report for Councillor Hunt's recommendations at the next licensing committee in April, so that we don't delay that, and we can do a separate consultation on that and then really look into that and really look at people's concerns and their problems and so on and so forth, because it does have to be looked into. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more comments? Silence. Okay. So let's go with Councillor Hunt's amendment to add. Are you still happy to go ahead? You still want to do your amendment? Oh, am I close enough?
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Have you got someone to second that?
I'll second it.
No problem. So we're going to vote on the amendment for Albert Road to be subsumed into the recommendation. Is that right? Yeah. Hands up if you want to. Those against? Oh, and there. Okay, so that falls, but I totally second Councillor Madwick's comments, and 15 weeks is long enough if we're doing April to get this report for extra information.
Can I just ask one question before we go to the vote about George, which of course I'll support? Is it acceptable that this could come back again in like 4 or 5 weeks with a view to talking about whether or not Albert Road should be a CIA? Is that acceptable? And as well as publishing this document?
Members, that's perfectly feasible and it allows that opportunity for what you seek to achieve, or Councillor Madwick seeks to achieve through the policy, and that we can provide a robust assessment for you for Albert Road that can be consulted on separately, and the Act allows you to do that, and you've got the flexibility to do that. I think that's actually within the draft statement that you've got, paragraph 9.16. It sets out the steps, and we're not tied to a policy to do that. You can review areas at any time. So I think it's probably a solution that meets both your needs and Councillor Madwick's.
And very presumably the police will come back and give us more advice as well.
Absolutely, they love coming here. So next we've got the amendment for the date, brought to us by Councillor Madwick, seconded by Councillor Mason, to change it to April 2025. Are we all happy to change that amendment?
I beg your pardon. Sorry, I'm so sorry about this. Are we going to take a vote on Councillor Madwick's proposal?
I thought we were just going to agree with the,
As long as we're all agreed, I'm fine.
This is just the proposal to change the date.
Yeah. Do we need to vote? No, I beg your pardon. On his proposal to bring the idea of the CIA back again.
We can absolutely
does that
do
need
that.
to be voted upon?
Yeah, let's vote on that then. All those in favour for the Thought as much. Perfect. Right, so the date, let's just go back to that. Councillor Madwick and Councillor Mason, change the date to April 2025. Are we all happy and agree to change it? Yeah, perfect. Right, so let's vote on... Will you two stop giggling? Yeah, go on.
Just a very quick question for our colleagues from the police. With regards to the North End output area, that is a very large geographical area, some parts of which have nighttime economy and some parts don't. Is there any scope in the future of breaking that down into the areas that do focus on nighttime economy in terms of the stats?
We can certainly break it down to an extent. Given the large geographical area of it, I would be minded to consider the impact that it might have on businesses that aren't currently part of an area that's causing the problems that would then suffer the consequences, if you like, of that policy.
So thinking of my own ward, for example, Fratton Road, New Road to an extent, maybe St Mary's Road have some nighttime economy, certainly more on Fratton Road, London Road. But when you go even 100 yards into the ward, it's 100% housing with no nighttime economy whatsoever. So the sheer fact that you've got those different areas may be skewing the stats slightly, especially over such a wide geographical patch. And then you go further up into North End where you've got, pubs like the Grapes, that on the main road. Again, you come a few yards off the main road, you're back into pure residential again.
We can provide data on request in order to support your decision making, so that or to help you make your decisions, and that's not a problem with it. I would say that a cumulative impact policy isn't the only way of addressing issues within nighttime economy related disorder. I would like to give you for instance, actually I have mentioned it briefly here, but we've put together, I say we, that's a collective we, partners and in particularly the industry, have set themselves up a brand new pub watch in the last 12 months that cover all nighttime economy areas that we've discussed today. It's really well supported. We're almost 12 months in. I think the AGM will be in April. They're sharing information about banned individuals who are persistent offenders in the nighttime economy, and we will start to see some of the results from that soon. The next phase in that Pub Watch mission, if you like, which is all based around the national Pub Watch model, is to move into central Portsmouth, which is going to run from Fratton for the rest of the island as one pub watch sharing information. That's coming very soon in the next couple of months. And then when that's been completed, we're going to push into the very north, into the Cosham area. So there's other things in the background that are likely to have an impact on some of the problems which are coming. So this isn't by any means your only opportunity looking at cumulative impact policies.
And by the way, I'm not in any way, shape or form thinking about putting a proposal in of any sort. It would just be nice to see the stats broken down, maybe by just areas that have more nighttime economy and excluding the ones that don't. At some point in the future, no rush.
And I will give one caveat. We can supply provided we've got it broken down in the fashion that you would want it. If our system doesn't give it back and allow us to pick the specific area that you're looking for, it might be a little bit wider, but we can discuss that outside.
Sorry, Chair, just further to that. Please rest assured, though, that if you have an incident at a pub or a licensed premise within your area, there is always a follow-up from the police licensing team and from the council licensing team. So we don't ignore an area just because it's not a cumulative impact area. We would still give that due care. And I think probably a key part, and probably slightly controversial, by creating a cumulative impact area, we don't generate another 20 police officers. We have to find a way of resourcing that area and how we manage that as well. So it would be perfect, because then we'd ask for the whole of Portsmouth to be a cumulative impact area and we'd have another 20,000 police officers. But unfortunately that doesn't happen, so we then have to sort of juggle our resourcing a little bit and look where we are putting those officers. But rest assured, we review our nighttime economy every week and we look at where we are going to put those resources. And actually that depends on events as well. When we have larger events in Southsea, we look at those areas. So yeah, but it's an ongoing process for us. We don't sit back and wait for our next licensing hearing. We are involved in what's going on.
Thank you. Right, let's move to the vote then for the Licensing Act 2003 draft statement of policy. Are we all happy to go out for consultation? Perfect. Now, this one should be a little bit more easier. Nikki, the Gambling Act.
Members, I think I'm going to keep it really easy for you, because the statutory process and the consultation process is so closely aligned that I think if we've got the gist of the Licensing Act consultation, you're with me on Gambling Act. So in summary, there is a statutory process. The timescales for the Gambling Act, and I will have to hold my hand up, as I mentioned in the report, why this is out of date as well. This policy has to be reviewed every 3 years. And we work with our partners and the Gambling Commission, because they regulate parts of gambling and the licensing authority regulates others. So you're not regulating the activity of gambling, you're regulating those premises where gambling takes place. So you've got to review it. The policy is in accordance with the statutory guidance. And the only changes to the draft that you have compared to the last policy was that any sections where the gambling advice has changed, we've duplicated that or updated your policy to reflect those changes. In all the time that I've been here, members, and I'm sure I don't want to tell you how long, some members have and long-serving members too, Councillor, long-serving members too. Since this Act was introduced in 2005 and then it was implemented in 2007, the Licensing Authority has never needed to consider a single application. That's not to say that you won't. but in terms of the activity and regulation of gambling, as you can imagine, it's quite tight. So I commend the policy to you to go out consultation. Members, if you feel that there is a need for them to have the same timescales, then, you know, I will work as... Hopefully there won't be as many responses to the Gambling Act policy, but we still have that process to go through. But that's where we want to go, members, out to consultation on this policy.
Members, questions first. Councillor Hunt.
It's not a question. I just want to make a comment when it comes to it. I beg your pardon.
Members, any questions? Okay. Councillor Hunt, comments.
Thank you, Councillor Strudwick. I can't let this pass without a comment about gambling and the addiction that it can cause. And indeed, there are cases that we see in the courts where people are so addicted that they do criminal things in order to feed their habit. That does not mean to say that the gambling industry is out of control or anything like that, but I do think we have to have an understanding of where gambling can lead people, and to see the increase in the prizes on machines going up, all this sort of thing pulls people in. We see it on our feeds all of the time, and I block those ads where I can, but they keep coming back. I do gamble. I do the lottery every week because I want to help our athletes and other people that the lottery supports. So that's where I gamble, and I wish people would do it that way. But yes, it is an industry. It's not one that I'm comfortable about because of where it sometimes leads. But I thought, as the community safety rep, I just needed to put that on record, which I'm sure most of us understand at least.
Thank you. Councillor Madwick.
I think the chair's fully aware that I love a flutter every now and then on the old roulette wheel, but she doesn't let me as much anymore now we're fiancés. It's like a no-no. We've got things to do like renovate houses and stuff nowadays, so we can't spend our money on black or red. But to no surprise, Chair, like the first one, I'd like to put in a recommendation to move this report to the end of April so that it ties in nicely with our previous report and that we can do it all together at the same time. So I'd like to recommend to amend the policy recommendation to say by the end of April in line with our previous one. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Happy to second.
Any more comments? See, I told you. Oh. Ah, nearly.
I am worried, reading on page 337, that there is no limit on the gambling in pubs on cribbage and dominoes.
Thank you. Right, any more comments? No? Perfect. Right, let's vote on the amendment for the date. Proposed by Councillor Madwick, seconded by Councillor Brown. Are we all happy to move to April 2025? Perfect. And then we'll move to the vote for the Gambling Act 2005 draft statement of policy to go out for consultation. Are we all happy? Beautiful. Perfect. That is the end of today's meeting. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.